Welcome to MTG Friends, I'm Ryan. In this episode, we're going to be doing some deck tech for Zagras, Thief of Heartbeats, that was brought to us in Zendikar Rising. Alright, Zagras, what do you do, big fella? He's a vampire rogue. He costs 6, in theory, 4/4 drop. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. Flying Death Touch Haste. Other creatures you control have Death Touch, which is what we're going to lever in this build for the most part. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. Alright, so in the party, that means clerics are going to make this 1 less to cast. Warriors, wizards, rogues. So this thing could be way cheaper to drop. You could drop this thing on turn 3, turn 4, depending on what you got on the board. But most likely, we're going to be able to drop this for 4 or 5 and get it out there swinging with haste and be able to utilize his mechanics really quickly. All right, so let's talk about this. In this build, we're going to have mostly 1/1 weenies that do ping damage. Ping for 1 damage. Do this, do that. In terms of just ping, ping, ping. So it's going to be hard for the opponent to keep creatures on the board. But we also have some mid-game, mid-range, and some late-game beefy creatures out on the board. And we're going to go through those right now. The other thing we want, and we have to utilize here, is we have a few cards in here that automatically give our creatures haste. And let's just start right in for the creature portion of this deck. And we're going to start off with Anger. Now, these stats kind of suck, but what is written on this is what is the reason we have it. Anger is a 2/2 4-drop haster. As long as Anger is in your graveyard and you control a mountain, creatures you control have haste. Fantastic. So, they're either going to have to decide, do I want this in your graveyard, or am I going to keep getting pinged for 2 each time? So having that in your graveyard is going to give all of these one damage pingers more fuel for the fire. Next up is a big one. This is a mid-level to late game. Now notice though, this is Balefire Dragon. It is a 7-drop. It is a 6/6 body and it is a flyer. But what's more important is whenever Balefire Dragon deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls. Oh boy, it is a wrath built in if Zagras is on the field. This is a fantastic, powerful card just on its own, which is why it's an include. It is an $18 card currently as of this recording. So if you don't have this card, you don't have the budget, you can just put something else in, either another 1 damage pinger or something else that you have in your arsenal that you really like that is most likely a flyer, because you'll see a theme in here. It's either one damage pingers or dragons, or there's a few goblins running around doing some shenanigans for sure. All right, next up, because this is all in alphabetical order, that's how Architect likes to do it, is Blood Cultist. This is going to be an auto include with Zagras because it is a 3-drop. It's in its colors, and you tap it to do 1 damage to target creature. Whenever a creature deals damage by Blood Cultist, that turn is put into a graveyard, because it's going to get put in a graveyard with Zagras out. You put a 1/1 counter on it. Great card, and it's a cheap card, so auto include for sure. Next up, Bogerdan Hellkite. Also an expensive, actually the most expensive in terms of mana that is in this build. But if you look at the stats, it's flash, it's flying, it's a 5/5er. So even if you don't have the haste mechanic in there, you can flash this at the end of your turn. When Bogerdan Hellkite enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. So if you have a board full of opponent's creatures, you have 5 damage to choose from, where if Zagras is out, you drop this thing, you can hit up to 5 creatures and they're all dead. Another nice thing about this card, it's not expensive. It's a great card for this build. And it's a 5/5 body flasher, so on its own, it's a fantastic card. Next up, we got a new one from Core 21. at first sight, when you look at this thing, you're like, what is this jank? Brash Taunter, 5-drop. Okay, pretty expensive for a 1/1, but it is indestructible. And whenever Brash Taunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to a target opponent. Great. But this last part is why it's with Zagras and the synergy. You spend 3 and tap this thing, Brash Taunter fights another target creature. So not only do you do damage for however big their creature is, and it's indestructible, but it'll have Death Touch with Zagras. So this is a fantastic card in this build. And another bonus, it's a buck. So put this in with Zagras. It is going to be fun to play. It's going to be obnoxious for the opponents to play. The only way they're getting rid of this is if they put a -1 counter on it. Which, this is Commander, so anything can happen. Alright, Butcher of Massacre. This is a 5/4 drop. It's not an expensive card to include. It is whenever Butcher of Massacre or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Now it is expensive, a 5 black, but it is a flyer as well, and it is a fantastic card because they got a sack creature, and we have a few other cards in here that is going to be utilized. However, if you want more of the pinging effect, you can certainly swap this out for another 1/1 damage pinger. Absolutely. I have this card. I really like this card. I'm including this card in this build because I am going to be playing this commander deck. Cunning Spark Mage, 3-drop 0/1. The only reason this is in is it's got Cunning Spark, deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and haste. Need I say more? No, I don't. Custodi Lich, or Lich. I think it's Lich. Put in the comments if it's Lich or Lich, or Leech. I think it's Lich. It doesn't matter. Moving on. 5-drop, 4/2. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. Oh, the Monarch. Whenever you become the Monarch, target player sacrifices a creature. This, again, good card for board clear immediately. Doesn't have to be in this build. I like this card. I like that you get to sack somebody else's creature. Fantastic. Especially if they have something that's indestructible. This is going to be a nice little board clear for a creature if there's something nasty out there. Next up, Dark Confident. This is an auto include in any black deck you're running in Commander. Dark Confident is a 2-drop. It is expensive. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. So this is all about draw. So if you don't have the budget for this or you don't have the card, swap it out. Swap it for a tutor that's not expensive. Swap it out for another creature. We are creature heavy in this, which is good, but you do not have to include this. I own it, I have it, I include it because it's just a very, very powerful 2-drop, and it's a way to get more cards because that's what you want. We have a couple others like Phyrexian Arena and a few others that help us do some draw because you know who's king for draw? Green, of course. Moving along. Otherwise, this episode's going to be 2 hours long, and I don't want this to be 2 hours long. Another mana ramp. That we're going to be talking about here is Dockside Extortionist. It's 2-drop. It is a expensive card. It's 26 and change at the filming of this episode, but it really does some cool stuff. It's a 1/2. You drop it quick. When Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, to create X treasure tokens where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponent controls. Now, these enchantments you can sack to add mana of any color. Now, if you drop this turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, your opponents are going to have mana rocks out. They're going to have artifacts out. We are playing Commander here. After all, you're going to get at least a few tokens out of this, treasure tokens. And that is huge ramp for you in those first handful of turns. Huge ramp. Super great. Get you into those mid-range, high-level cards that are going to just do fantastic stuff for you. That's probably why it's so expensive, is because it is extremely powerful. Moving on. All right, Drakaseth, Maw of Flames. You might be looking at it going, what? What? But remember, Zagras, if it's out, or Zarg, I totally butchered that name. Zagras. Blah. Brain fart. Drakaseth, Maw of Flames. It is the second most expensive thing in our deck in terms of mana cost. 4 red, flyer, dragon. Me loveth some dragons. It's a 7/7. Now, that's not the reason we have this in here. Although we have a bunch of dragons in here. Because it's very effective having these flyers with Zagras. Whenever Drakma Maw of Flames attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and then 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. So you can be hitting up to 3 creatures on the board with deathtouch. But if you don't have that, you can be hitting 3 opponents, one for 4 damage and the other 2 for 3 damage. But assume there's going to be creatures out on the board. Great card. Alright, here's a new one from the new Zendikar Rising, Drana the Last Blood Chief. It is a 5-drop 4/4 flyer. Whenever Drana the Last Blood Chief attacks, defending player chooses a non-legendary creature card in your graveyard. You return that card to the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it. The creature is a vampire in addition to its other types. Now, the really nice and important thing about this is this commander deck isn't a one-trick pony. It's not just oh, I have a bunch of weenies that don't cost much and ping, 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 deathtouch, deathtouch. You want some beef in there too. That's why we got this in here. You're going to have some reanimation with this card as long as Drana stays alive. And it's a flyer and it's got some bulk to it. It's a 4/4 that's only going to get bigger. It's just a great card. I don't know why I said it gets bigger. The creatures you get become bigger. Whatevs. I'm not going to edit that out because you know what? We're doing it live. We're doing it live. Dreadhorn Butcher. It's a 2-drop. It's a 1/1 with haste. This is great early game. Haste, whenever Dreadhorn Butcher deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, put a 1/1 counter on Dreadhorn Butcher. When Dreadhorn Butcher dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Oh, once again, Zagras, your death-touching shenanigans is only that much better with Dreadhorn Butcher. Nice. Very nice. And then if you don't have a target to hit, it gets bigger by default when it hits the face of one of your opponents. Loving it. And that's a very recent card from War of the Spark. Alright, Erebus God of the Dead. This is specifically in there to draw cards. Pay 2 life, draw a card. And it's nice that it's a 5/7 indestructible that becomes a really insidious creature if you have devotion. And your devotion really only has to be 5. That's great. It's a $10 card at the moment, but I think it's worth it. I include this in a lot of the black decks that I have. Fire Slinger. Don't really need to go into this one. It's a 1 damage pinger. Glorybringer for 5 4/4 flying haste. Again, with the exert mechanic, which means when it attacks, you can exert it, which means it does not untap on the next untap phase. It does 4 damage to a non-dragon creature an opponent controls. Again, death touch with Zagras, and it's a hasting flying 4/4 dragon of doom. Who doesn't love Glorybringer? This one is fantastic, and you can pick it up for less than $1. Goblin Chainwhirler for 3 red, a 3/3 first striker. But more importantly, when Goblin Chainwhirler enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control, not creatures that you control. So that death touch isn't going to hit your creatures. It's only going to hit all of your opponents. So this is, in essence, with Zagras out, a Wrath of God in red. 4/3 red. And you get a first striker out there with a 3/3 body. Ooh, love it. And it doesn't cost much to put in your deck. Goblin Sharpshooter for 3, a 1/1. Another pinger. Deals 1 damage to any target. This is easily replaceable. It is a little spendy for what it is. Goblin Sharpshooter doesn't untap during your untap step. Whenever a creature dies, untap Goblin Sharpshooter, and you tap it to deal 1 damage to any target. If you don't want to spend the cash to get this card, or you have another pinger you want to put in there, or even better, put in another instant or sorcery spell, but we'll get to those later. Something that's cheap, even another tutor. I mean, this is easily replaceable. We have enough creatures that you can do that. Hellkite Tyrant for 6. It is 6/5. This card is specifically in here not for the Zagras mechanics, but because it is a flying trample 6/5 with, whenever Hellkite Tyrant deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. That means permanently. Not when he dies, give them back. No, they're yours. That's it. So you're going to be taking people's mana rocks. You're going to be taking whatever other craziness artifacts are going on the board. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. Now, it is an alt-win scenario. The likelihood of you having 20 artifacts of everyone else's isn't all that high, but you never know. But most likely not. It's gonna run you about $13.50, $14 at the moment. Great card. I got it. I'm gonna play it. Judith the Scourge Diva, 3-drop 2/2. Other creatures you control get +1/+0, which isn't the most important part about this card. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith the Scourge Diva deals 1 damage to any target. Oh, a pinger. Ping, ping, ping. Kalitas, Trader of Get. I got tongue-tied there for a second. A Vampire Warrior, lifelink, which is nice because we're running a couple of cards that does some life damage to ourselves. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature's token onto the battlefield. And for 3, sacrifice another vampire or zombie, the ones you just made. Put 2 1/1 counters on Kalitas, Traitor of Get. He's a 3/4 4-drop with lifelink. This is just a really good include because we wanna have a little bit of life gain going on. Liliana, Heretical Healer. I'm sure I said that a little funky, but how do you really say that? Heretical? Heretical, because it's a heretic, right? It's a human cleric lifelinker. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile Liliana Healer, then return her to battlefield transformed under her owner's control. If you do, put a 2/2 black zombie creature in, which is just fantastic. And you flip that thing and it becomes Liliana Defiant Necromancer. And for a +2, each player discards a card. Oh, that being a +2 is fantastic. And the -X, return target non-legendary creature card from a graveyard to the battlefield. And I believe that's from your graveyard. Yes, from your graveyard. And the ultimate, -8, whenever a creature dies, bring a creature to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. Now, the likelihood of you getting that ultimate is probably not very high, but that flippy flip card is fantastic. This is a more spendy card. It's going to run you around $22 at the moment. You can swap this out for something you see fit. If you swap out too many of these creatures, you want to make sure you put in a few creatures and not just start putting a bunch of instants and sorceries and other artifacts. Magus of the Moon. Now this one is a little bit janky and I love it. Non-basic lands are mountains. It's a 2/2 3-drop. Now, because of our land base, this really isn't going to hurt us much because we are running 14 swamps and 13 mountains, and then a handful of non-basics that are dual red-black lands. So it's at most gonna give us a little problem in black, but it's really not gonna. This is gonna cause a lot of grief for your opponents especially those that aren't running red. It is a great card. I recommend you put this in. If you don't have it, I recommend you get it because you'll use this card in other decks. Great card. But if you want to sub it out, you could always just put Blood Moon in there as an enchantment. And if you don't want to run Blood Moon, because that's not a dollar card either, you can certainly swap this out for another pinger or another flyer. Massacre Worm. This is in here not specifically for Zagras, but specifically because it just kicks some keister. It is one of the most powerful, cool black cards, in my opinion. When Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. So this is, in essence, likely a board wipe for a lot of things. And not to mention that it's also a 6/5. It's just a great card. And it has gone down in price because it has a reprint as of Core 21. Fantastic. I am a fan of reprints. Mayhem Devil for 3/3/3. It is a devil. It is a crazy looking card. This was all over the meta for a while in the Spark days. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. That 1 damage is from the devil, so the Zagras mechanic of Death Touch 1 damage pingers is in effect. Machias the Unhallowed for a 3 black legendary zombie cleric. It's got Intimidate, which I will explain in a moment. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. Well, there's definitely humans running around in Commander Land. Other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. Oh, that's just so fantastic because most of the creatures we're running are not humans. So when a creature with Undying dies, if it had no 1/1 counter on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a 1/1 counter on it. Oh, that is so fantastic. It is a 5/5 drop as well. Now, this is an expensive one. It is a $33+ card at the moment, hopefully, even with the reprint. So, swap it out if you need to. Swap it out for something that is a cleric as well, or something that works with the party mechanic with Zagras, or again, a 1/1 pinger. Because there's still more that we don't have in this because we have more powerful ones running. Null Priest of Oblivion. This is right out of Zendikar Rising. It is a 2-drop, 2/1. It has kicker 3 black, menace lifelink. Some more lifelink for us early on. When Null Priest of Oblivion enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a reanimation creature. This is so awesome. This card is awesome. And it is not super expensive at the moment. So pick one of these up if you don't have it and put it in this bad boy. Olivia Voldaren. This is in there for the Zagras Death Touch shenanigans. I think I've said shenanigans 3 times in this episode. Let's see how many more I have said it. If you watch this whole video, put in the comments how many times I said shenanigans. Oh, that one counts. It's a vampire flyer. Olivia Voldaren deals 1 damage to another target creature. Oh, ping, ping, ping. That creature becomes a vampire. In addition to its other types, put a 1/1 counter on Olivia Voldaren, and it gets bigger. Oh, that's so awesome. And for 5, you can gain control of target vampire for as long as you control Olivia Voldaren. Now, notice this says target vampire. That doesn't necessarily mean one that you pinged. So if you're playing somebody that's playing vampires, you can go ahead and steal one. Yes, sir. I like it. May I have another? Oh, yes. Also not super expensive. So, moving on. Prodigal Pyromancer. Specifically in here for the ping of 1 damage. Rakdos Ixpitter for 3/1/1. Also specifically in here for the ping of 1. Sheldred Whispering 1 for 7/6/6 drop. It's got Swamp Walk. You are likely going to be playing people with swamps. It is statistically very likely. And if you aren't, well, you just got really unlucky. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Oh, more reanimation. Sick. It's sick. This is a sick card. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. You're playing against 3 people. They're all sacking creatures. This card is disgusting. Disgusting. If it wasn't so expensive to drop 5 black, I would say this card is totally busted. But because it has that much mana to spend to get it out there, not super busted. Oh man, great card. Pick it up if you don't got it. It is, you can swap this. If you haven't swapped out too many creatures, which I don't recommend swapping out many of these, but if you haven't swapped out too many, you can certainly drop in another mana rock or removal spell that is, in the couple dollar range for sure. You could even put in a murder, although I recommend putting this in. Twilight Prophet for 4. It's a 2/4. It's got flying. This is in here because of the ascend mechanic and what it does. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. You are likely going to have 10 of something when you add all the lands and everything. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the city's blessing, which you most likely will, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Ugh, more draw. Each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. There is no downside to this card. Put this bad boy in. Put this bad boy in every black commander deck you got, if you got it. As long as it doesn't completely go against the mechanics of whatever you're trying to do. All right, this is in here for some haste. 5-drop 4/4 creature. Creatures you control have haste. Creatures your opponent controls enter the battlefield tapped. Oh, that's just mean. That is so mean. Their creatures come in tapped. That's so mean. I love it. I love it. Vindictive. Here we go with that word again. Leash or Lich. Leech. I think it's Leech. Lichen? A lichen? It doesn't matter. Let's not dwell. When Vindictive Lich dies, choose one or more. Each mode must target a different player. Unless you're playing one-on-one, you're targeting 3 people. Target opponent sacrifices a creature. Bueno! Target opponent discards 2 cards. Molto bueno! Target opponent loses 5 life. Yeah, that's cool. That's like the least exciting out of all of these. You can pick this up for less than $4. It is a great card. Walking Ballista. This is in here for a couple reasons. 1, this card's just awesome. Banned in a few formats. Walking Ballista enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it. 4, put a 1/1 counter on Walking Ballista. And this is the kicker right here. Remove a 1/1 counter from Walking Ballista. It deals 1 damage to any target. The text in this is very important. It does the damage. So it's not in the form of counters or anything. You're just removing a counter to do damage. So you could have a huge, beefy Walking Ballista, remove a 1/1 counter from it, and use the Zagras deathtouch mechanic here, and start doing some board clear. Excellent card all around. Well rounded for this deck. Yawgmoth Thran Physician. This is in here and from Modern Horizons. It is fantastic. Protection from humans. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and draw a card. Drawn mechanic again. And then the not as important part is for 2, discard a card and proliferate. You could proliferate that last card we just talked about. Walking Ballista. That's not too shabby. All right, moving on. All right, that is the end of the segment of creatures that we have in this deck. We're running 36, so if you like to run a few more creatures, put a few more in. But I would say don't run too many less than that. All right, now for our enchantments, we got Bitter Blossom. Now this is specifically in here because at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life. Okay, and you create a 1/1 Black Fairy Rogue creature token with flying. Now those are going to be 1/1 Pingers of Death with the Zagras mechanic. Plus it's a rogue, which is going to make it 1 less to cast for Thief of Heartbeats. So this synergizes very, very well with Zagras. Now it is not a cheap card. It's not the most expensive thing, but if you need to sub this out, you can certainly sub this out for another enchantment or another haster or another mana rock. But I highly recommend you put Bitter Blossom in here. Fervor. All right. Fervor is creatures you control have haste. Again, we want to get our pingers out there and start pinging away. Or we want our beefy dragons to be swinging hard and heavy and let their mechanics trigger that are doing damage to the board and to creatures. Phyrexian Arena, auto include in every black deck. It's just a no-brainer include. Liliana of the Veil. This is in here because it is powerful. It is a 3-drop. Each player discards a card for +1, -2. Target player sacrifices a creature, and -6. Separate all permanent target players control into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents in the pile of their choice. Now you can put all their lands in one and everything else in the other and make them have to choose that. Or you can do piecemeal and just decide whatever strikes your fancy. Also a relatively expensive card. I have it, I love it, I play it. You can certainly put in another Planeswalker that has a nicer flavor. It's really up to you. Zarkan the Masterless. This is in here, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to put it in here. It's a 5-drop, comes in with 5 loyalty. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage. There we go again with that 1 damage to that creature. So it can create a dragon itself to create that one ping. Or you can +1 it, and until the end of turn, it becomes a 4/4 dragon. But in this build, you're going to be using its static abilities of if you got a dragon, it's going to create 1 damage. So you've got Zagras out, that 1 damage is lethal. All right, we got our mana rocks now and our artifacts. Auto include in like every commander deck. Arcane Signet, 1 color of the identity of your commander. Oh, just a no-brainer. If you're playing commander, you should be playing this card. Gilded Lotus, because we want some mana ramp, and we're not going to get it from green because we're not running green. Add 3 mana of any 1 color. Boy, this is a powerful, great one of the best mana rocks. We got Mana Vault, which probably is close to the best mana rock ever. Mana Vault doesn't untap during your untap step at the beginning of your upkeep. You may pay 4 if you do untap Mana Vault at the beginning of your draw step. If Mana Vault is tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. But oh, this is just a great card. You can definitely swap this out since it's got a hefty price on it. You can put a Mind Stone in there. You can put any other cheap mana rock that tickles your fancy. This is just a very good card to include, and if you have it, of course include it. Shadow Spear. This is in here because this is in here actually for a handful of reasons. Let's talk about Shadow Spear. I wouldn't say this is an auto include in every commander deck, but there are a few really key ingredients to this thing. It's not so much that you get a +1/+1 and it has trample and lifelink. The lifelink is great because we do have a few triggered abilities and activated abilities that let us draw cards for life damage. But this next part, permanents your opponent controls lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So you can get some creature that's destructible, and then use your pinging mechanic to give it death touch. And you can also remove hexproofing from creatures, which often is the case in a lot of commander builds. That is just a fantastic alternative way to get past some of the mechanics that are difficult to deal with on people's boards with indestructible and hexproof. So awesome mechanics on this card, and it only costs you 1 to get out, and it's 2 to equip. Fantastic card. Soul Ring, auto include. Moving on. Swiftfoot Boots. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Now this one is specifically because it's hexproof and not shroud, so you can target your creature still if you so desire because it's hexproof. Sword of Sinew and Steel. It's a 3-drop. This is in here for kind of a creative reason. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection for black and from red. That's great. That's great. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target planeswalker and up to 1 target artifact. That is fantastic. That is just a way to start clearing some of those hard to get rid of artifacts and planeswalkers that might be out on the board against the people that you're playing. It's not going to set you super far back. It's a $10-11 card right now. Talisman of Indulgence. Obviously, this is in here for black and red. Thornbite Staff. This is in here because you can attach it to a creature, and then you could tap that creature for 1 damage to a player or creature. Zagras mechanic, deathtouch mechanic in the house. Thousand-Year Elixir. This is specifically in here so that you can have haste for your creatures. But the other parts of this is great. You may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. And then you can untap target creature. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, now let's go into our land package, which we're going to just briefly go through. So we got our lands that give you dual colors. Badlands. You can easily swap out Badlands. You do not have to be running Badlands. By all means, swap this out. If you got it, run it. I have it. I run it. Replace it for another dual land, even one that comes in tapped. Blood Crypt Shockland, auto include. Dragonskull Summit, in here specifically for the colors. This one is great. It comes in tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain, which you most likely will. This one is another. It enters the battlefield, you may reveal a swamp or mountain, and then it doesn't come in tapped. And then you got your mountain package. And how many mountains are we running? We are running 13. All right. And then next we got Smoldering Marsh. It comes in untapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. Of course, I said that in reverse. Got the Strip Mine. Now I'm running Strip Mine because you can destroy target land if you need to. By all means, sub this out if you don't really need that or don't have it. It's always a good thing to be able to remove somebody's non-basic lands that's just causing grief. And then we're running 14 swamps, I believe. Yes, indeed. And then Temple of Malice, which is a newer card reprint. Pretty simple. It comes in, you can scry for 1. This one is just in here because it's dual colored. I like to scry, but this is easily replaceable. Easily replaceable. And then Wastelands is in here. This is just a no-brainer why you got in here. You can destroy a target non-basic land. Swap this out for another swamp or a mountain or a super cheap dual land. It's just in here because in Commander, you're going to be dealing with non-basic lands doing cool stuff. It's just not cool stuff for you. All right, let's go into our instance and sorcery spells. Some removal. Destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. Removal. We got Dark Ritual in here. This is in here so that we can ramp up. Get some, because we have some mana intensive creatures that we want to get out quick if we can. This one you could swap out if you're not so worried about ramping up quick, but boy, if this is in your opening hand, boy, would that be great. Deadly Rollick, it's a new one. It is, if you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Exile target creature. I believe this is specifically a new card out of Commander 2020. Yes, it is. This is a great card to pick up if you got it. If you don't want to spend the $9 that it currently costs, swap it out for a whatever, a Murderous Rider. Although a Murderous Rider won't exile, or swap it out for another exiling card for sure. Eat to Extinction. This is in here because we're mostly going to be destroying creatures, but it's in here for the exile mechanic. Exile target creature, planeswalker, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. Just a great card, easily swappable. You could certainly put in something else that just doesn't have the exile mechanic that costs less than 4. I put it in here because I think it's a very effective removal spell because it's an instant. Erebos' Intervention. This is to get rid of those persnickety, indestructible creatures or stuff you just don't seem to be able to get rid of. Choose one. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. You gain X life. I love both of those sides of that spell. Or exile up to twice X cards from graveyards. Excellent. It's excellent. And it doesn't cost anything. It is less than $1, folks. This is a great card. This is great because it offsets the Phyrexian Arena mechanics and the Erebos' mechanics of losing 2 life each time you draw a card. You can get rid of something that's really sticky on the board by giving it -X/-X. Fantastic. All right, Vampiric Tutor. Obviously, you can swap this out for a more cost-effective financially card. I got it. I run it. Search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. You lose 2 life. Vraska's Contempt. Exile target creature, planeswalker. You gain 2 life. For 4. Great. Great card. Academ's Awakening. One of the new boys in town. It is amazing. On the flip side of this, it is a swamp that you can play instead of this. So if you're having mana issues early on, you can just play this for its black mana. It's a bolt land, so it will, if you want it to come in untapped, it'll do 3 damage to you. Who cares in Commander? And then, more importantly, return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creatures cards that each have a different converted mana cost X or less. So it's 3 black X, and then you can be pulling out a plethora of creatures in your graveyard and put them right back onto the battlefield. Oh, fantastic. Yep, return from your graveyard. Love it. Love it. All right. Bonfire of the Damned. This thing is spicy. Bonfire of the Damned deals X damage to target player and each creature he or she controls. And it's got Miracle X red. You may cast this card for its miracle cost when you draw it, if it's the first card you draw this turn. So it can cost you a little bit less for its miracle cost. Boy, this thing is great because it's gonna clear their board for X damage. Great removal spell in red. Damnation. Who doesn't love a little bit of damnation? Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated for 4. Love this card. I remember when it first came out, way back when. Oh, way back when. Was it Planar Chaos? Oh, I have to look it up. I have such... Yep, Planar Chaos. I have such good memories of this card when I was playing relatively competitive back then. What else can we say about Damnation? It's a Wrath of God in black. It is wunderbar. It's going to set you back a little bit, so you can swap this card out for something else. Certainly but there is really no replacement for this card. You either run this card or you don't run this card. All right, moving on. Rise of the Dark Realms for 7 black. This thing is a late game, oh, let's have some fun spell. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Yeah, I just have to chuckle and say, love that. All graveyards. Toxic Deluge. This is a, things are not going right. As an additional cost to cast this spell, pay X life. All creatures get -X until end of turn. This is a reset button. We have a few of them in this build. It's always good to have a few reset buttons in a commander deck. And that is the deck. All right, so again, sort of as a recap, what you want to do is get those small creatures out, ramp up, get some card draw action going. Once Zagras hits the field, he's likely going to hit the field for less than it costs. So you could very realistically get Zagras out for 4 or 5 without a problem, because we're running rogues, we're running wizards, we're running clerics, we're running the things that gets this thing out. He's got haste, he's got deathtouch, he's got flying, he's great, and he's a 4/4. And most importantly, all these creatures are gonna have deathtouch when they're out on the board, and these little 1 damage pingers are going to be clearing the board for you to just keep smacking people in the face. The one downside to this deck is you are probably going to be a target. You're probably going to get ganged up on. But, you know, such is life with commander decks and EDH. So, let me know what you think. If you have any questions about the deck, or you're wondering, hey, I don't have this card, that card, do you have another alt card that I could put in that's cheaper? I would love to answer any of those kinds of questions. If you see a card that, hey, oh man, did you think about this card? You should put this in. I love hearing feedback and other people's builds and tweaks and modifications. That's what this is all about, folks. Hey, be a friend of the gathering. Smash that like button, hit subscribe. We are loving interacting with everybody out here. Look at some of our other episodes. We'll be doing more deck tech. We'll be doing reviews, all sorts of stuff. Check out the next episode, and we'd love to hear you. Thanks again for being a friend of the gathering, MTG friends.